Hello, YouTube, Internet, world. Welcome back to another episode of Dime Store Cinema on the road. Let's talk movies. Today I would like to discuss the 2004 Japanese horror film, Infection. Now, Infection has a special place in my heart because it's kind of responsible for my wife and I getting together. Back in college, I did not do well in college, emotionally, mentally, physically. I was ill most of the time, and it was just in general a bad experience for me. I didn't belong where I was. It was a bad situation. So I very rarely left my dorm room. And most of the time when I was even in my dorm room, I was very shut off from people and didn't want to speak with them or converse with them or have anything to do with anyone except for a very close-knit group of people. There were about 3 or 4 of us. They're the only people that I wanted to talk to. I didn't want to deal with anyone else. Well, at the time, one of these people I was really close with was very interested in a young woman. And so he would often invite her and one of her friends over to watch movies. And most of the time, they would look through and borrow my movies because I had a very extensive collection of DVDs back in those days. So this was one that we watched. Infection was one that we ended up watching, I think, more than once. And a lot of the reason why we watched it more than once is because it's not a straightforward narrative. The story is very metaphorical. It plays a lot with color and with perception and with perception from both the audience point of view and the character's point of view, dealing with mirrors and ghosts and what side of the quote-unquote looking glass you're on. So it's a very interesting story structure with a lot of very graphically beautiful, in a way, thematic elements. So to continue on with the story, my wife and I ended up, she was one of the women in question, ended up talking about this movie a lot, which led to further conversations, which led to us becoming friends, which led to us keeping in touch after I left school, which led to us continuing to get to know each other better, and me going to her graduation and us deciding that we wanted to further relationship and so on and so forth. Fast forward, we're married. So this movie, and I mean, I think as we go, you'll kind of see that movies are almost involved in almost every important moment of my life, which is one of the reasons that I hold them in such high regard, on top of my already pre-existing love of narrative and story. In any case, Infection. So the story goes, there's a hospital that's currently, and it's been a while since I've watched it, so I can't remember all of the exact details. Either the hospital is going out of business, or it's getting ready to close down for the night, and I'm not sure which one it is. But it's a skeleton crew. There are only, I think, 2 doctors and several nurses and a few other people, and some of the patients that they have left are the only people left. And an emergency call comes on from an ambulance, and there's a patient that really needs attention right away. They're trying to get them to convert and go to go to the other hospital that's further down the road, and communications get messed up, and they insist that they can't make it there. They have to go to this hospital. The patient won't make it. So creepy things happen, even like right from the go. Creepy things happen. This patient ends up just sitting in their doorstep. And this is one of the things that I respect so much about a lot of Japanese, in particular, horror films. There's not a lot of attempt to exist within our reality, the viewer's reality. They completely invent their own reality. And it makes things, I think, more creepy, because things are recognizable, but so different from how we experience them as the audience that it just puts you on edge, and you have this really uneasy, creepy feeling. In any case, this patient is left there. They go get the patient, and it turns out that this patient has some kind of very strange ailment that they can't explain, and so the patient dies, and then there's a cover-up. They die because of negligence. The doctor is overworked, overstressed. There's negligence involved. The patient ends up dying. They try to cover it up. And so the whole story is kind of like this amalgamation of a revenge story, a ghost story, and a psychological thriller. Everything rolled into one. Like, and it kind of feels like, and nothing is really completely explained. Like, a lot is left up to the audience, which is another reason why I like this movie. And not left up to the audience in a way that makes it feel like the filmmakers didn't know what they were doing, but in a way that makes the film more creepy. And there's a fine line there, because you can leave too much up to the audience, to the point that it just looks like the writer didn't know how to tell the story, so they're just like, well, we just won't tell them everything. So there's a fine line there. And I think that they toe it really, really well, to the point that, like I said, it makes it more creepy as opposed to making the audience feel like there's something missing. So it was great on that, in that regard. So what's interesting is those elements that I was talking about, where it's all those different types of genres. I think first and foremost, it's a ghost story. And the ghost within the story is what's leading to the other things. It forces this change perspective within the people who are involved. So it's a ghost getting revenged for their negligence and for the fact that they're trying to cover up their wrongdoings. But the way that the ghost does that, it doesn't just haunt them. It changes their way of seeing things. And here's the thing with the mirror, kind of like what happens is, it's like they go through almost an Alice Through the Looking Glass thing. Their perspective gets switched, and their way of hinting at that is that things that are typically red become green, and things that are particularly green shift color palettes. So there's all this green ooze coming out of these bodies that are infected. So through part of the movie, you think it's some kind of, virus movie, where there's like this really crazy virus being let loose in this hospital, and they have to try to contain it. But then it morphs into something that's more that's deeper than that, where it's this psychological haunting that's going on that causes them to lose their mind, and they end up doing things that they don't realize they're doing. You have a nurse who sticks her hand in boiling water that they use to sterilize their needles, and she comes out with arms full of needles. There's just a lot of really creepy scenes like that. And so it's this interesting idea that I don't think I've ever really seen replicated in quite the same way. Like, I've seen plenty of ghost stories that toe the line with psychological aspects, and I've seen plenty of gory films that also have to do with hauntings, and I've seen these types of things, but I've never seen a movie that has so competently made you think that it's one thing and then switches to another thing without it feeling jarring. Like, everything goes together perfectly. As you're watching it, when it's revealed that something else is going on than what you think is going on, it's never this, oh, well, that changed quickly. It was always this, oh, yeah, that's what's going on. So, it's really great. And then, I mean, it did kind of have an ending that is very typical of horror films, where you think everything's over and everything's going to be fine, but then it gets revealed that no, it's not going to be, and you're still through the looking glass, as it were. And so, there's that aspect of it, which is just kind of like, yeah, all right, fine. It's for such an original, interesting horror film to have an ending like that is kind of like, okay, fine. It's fine, I guess, but yeah. But I don't want to take that away from the movie. This movie, and I mean, obviously, like I said, I'm a little biased because it's played such an important part in my life, and this is one of the early Japanese horror films that I watched. It was one that I bought without watching when Blockbuster was going out of business, or around the time that they were going out of business. I think I got it for like $4 or something like that. So I got it without knowing anything about it. I just knew that after watching The Eye and seeing a few other Japanese or Asian horror films, that I just wanted to see as many as I could. I think the first one that I purchased after watching The Eye was The Tale of Two Sisters, which is another one that I'll probably talk about at some point. I need to watch it again, though, and refresh my memory, but that movie's amazing. And then this one was shortly after that. Audition was another one that I bought relatively close to the time of all of this. I was very focused in around this time on Asian cinema, Asian horror films in particular. So I spent a lot of time chasing those down. This is when I got into Old Boy and Sympathy for Mr. Vengeance and Lady Vengeance. This is when I got Audition. This is when I got Infection, when I got Reincarnation, which is another really good one I want to talk about. So there were just a slew of movies that they all came out sort of around the same time. They were all way above average when it comes to horror films, and they all just happened to be available to me at that time in my life. So there's a very it was a very opinion-shaping time in my life as far as cinema goes. It was around the time that I was really getting into it, and I was making a lot of short films, and I really wanted to get into filmmaking itself. It was when I was, in as much as I ever have in my life, pursuing that. Obviously, some choices led to other avenues in my life. But it was during that time, and these movies were the ones that really, really fueled that, because I just saw some really great cinema, really great modern cinema, and particularly the type of movie that I wanted to make, which is horror films, which have always interested me. However, I will say now, if I were to make movies, I would want to do more than just horror. Back then, it was mainly just I wanted to do horror, but now I would be interested in doing a lot of other things. I have a few ideas for dramas and for action films, and even a superhero film I would want to make. But that's neither here nor there. We're talking about Infection, which which I haven't mentioned is a great movie. No, like I said, I might be a little biased. Like, this movie was a big deal during that time of my life when I was, really, really defining my taste in movies and really searching out more obscure things and foreign things. And like I said, it led to my wife and I really connecting as friends. So, I don't know what that says about the movie, if it says anything at all, but at least it might give you a little insight into my life, because that's so interesting. No. But in all honesty, it really is a good movie. They really do a great job of blending these genres and telling a cohesive story without telling a clear one. And I really like that, because it's so hard to do. It's really hard to tell a story that leaves the audience questioning everything while still being an effective narrative. I think The Usual Suspects did this really well, because after you watch that movie, you start questioning what was real and what wasn't. And I mean, the consensus is that the entire movie was false and none of it actually happened. But then you kind of you mix in, was like, well, how many grains of truth did he use? I love that type of storytelling. I'm not big into twists per se, and Infection doesn't really have a twist, but it has this presentation of how much of what we just saw was the ghost affecting people's points of view. How much of what we just watched was the result of the haunting? Was any of it real? Were these people really dying in the way that we were seeing them? And it doesn't really... It leaves it up to the audience to be like, well, how much of this is true? Is any of this true? Were these people just imagining things? Did their imagination lead them to kill everyone? Or were the people already dead? And it's really great how ambiguous it is. Or not how much ambiguity there is, but how it was ambiguous was great. And like I said, it's a really fine line to tread, and they did it really well. So there's not really much else to say about it. I mean, it was a great movie if you're into horror films, particularly Asian horror films. I think you'll really enjoy it. It's not one that you hear as much about. Typically the movies you hear about, and particularly the J-horror, you hear a lot more about Ringu and Ju-on and movies like that, and a lot of that is because there were American remakes of them. Pulse is another one. But this one I think is just as good or better than any of those. There wasn't a remake of it, which is probably why you don't hear about it as much. But I think that it, as far as the movie itself goes, I think it's better. And I mean, I think it kind of depends on what you're into, because this one's a little more gory. But what I like about it is that it's not a realistic gore. It's kind of a weird, psychologically trippy gore, which I like a lot more than like torture porn gore. I find that to be off-putting and unpleasant to sit through. But when it comes to like Evil Dead type gore, which is fun and campy, or more, like I said, like the psychological body horror of like a Lynch or this movie, where the images are disturbing and gross, but it's not it's not based in realism. It's based in something other, something that it just adds a creep factor to it. I like that stuff a lot. So yeah, if you're into that type of movie, if you're into horror films, if you're into Asian cinema at all, I would suggest watching it. I think it's worth your time. I think it's worth your effort to find it. I don't think it gets enough attention, because there are other movies that are better than it, but you hear about a lot of other movies that are no better than it. So, I think it just kind of got lost in the shuffle, because this is right around the time when the Japanese horror craze in America was really at its peak. So I just think it got lost in the shuffle, unfortunately. But in any case, thank you for watching. Please please subscribe if you're into that kind of thing, and I will talk to you all next time. Bye bye.